Inside the Birds is back. What's up, everybody? Geoff Mosher alongside Adam Caplan. We've got a lot to talk about here as the month is May. It's going to be June pretty soon. We've talked about doing a comprehensive coaching staff pod series. So we're going to do part one today and focus on the offensive staff, outline some roles, talk about what some of the new guys were brought in to do and some of the ideas that they bring. And Adam and I, of course, will also have some news and nuggets about some recent developments, including the return of sports teams in Pennsylvania as we record this on, what is today, Wednesday? The
Wednesday
27th?
night, yeah. You're listening Thursday, yeah.
That's right. The governor of Pennsylvania, Tom Wolf, has cleared Pennsylvania sports to resume. So we'll talk about that, how that impacts the Eagles. First, we'd like everybody to please check out the latest ITB TV on our YouTube channel. We have a great guest, former Eagles Pro Bowl left tackle, Trey Thomas, and Trey was amazing. He helped us break down Andre Dillard's rookie year, strengths, weaknesses, where he thinks Dillard will naturally improve, what he thinks Dillard needs to do a little bit more of. Really good stuff on not just Andre Dillard, but also the entire offensive line tendencies, some of Jeff Stoutland's coaching tendencies. It's really good stuff. And Trey has just started up his own YouTube channel called In the Trenches with Trey Thomas. So we encourage you to check out that YouTube site as well. But Trey was fantastic. Adam, I know you enjoyed it. The personality really came out.
Yeah, it's funny. You told the story about how when Trey was a player and you were a young reporter, or in terms of covering the Eagles, Trey didn't say very much.
Right.
And then as we would learn, and you definitely hear it in this ITB TV segment with Trey, he's got a very strong personality, very, very opinionated. I know Trey a little bit. Particularly, I did some events with him, did Ron Jaworski's show a couple times in person with him. And now, he's concentrating on his webpage, also his YouTube page, In the Trenches with Trey Thomas. And the thing that I love about, I watched the tape before we did the interview. I went in thinking a certain thing about what Andre Dillard's issues were. Well, people are saying it's his weight. Really, his weight has nothing to do with it. You'll learn. I don't want to give away what you learn, but yeah, it would help him if he was stronger, and he'll get stronger because he'll lift. But his issues have nothing to do with weight. It's everything else. Right. When you watch the tape breakdown, by the way, it's all 22 tape. Does a great job with it. You see a lot of good, and you see some bad or some stuff that needs to be improved upon. It's typical stuff from a rookie player. And I asked Trey about his rookie season, what he went through as an Eagle in 1997, come out of Florida State. I didn't know that he was new to the left tackle position. I didn't know that he played another position before that. So it's interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. And obviously he talked about playing right tackle and left tackle, which is something that not a lot of kids, and certainly Dillard, don't have that experience doing. Sometimes you get segmented to one position and you stick there. So again, we encourage you to check it out on our Inside the Birds YouTube channel. We've also got some good news that we felt, Adam and I thought would be really good to share with our listeners. It may sound a little bit like humble brag, but we wanted everybody to know because we want to share it with our accomplishment with our listeners. And that's this week, for the first time ever, an Inside the Birds podcast episode hit 10,000 listens on its own. And it looks like two more are going to hit that mark and exceed it by the end of the week. And Adam and I just wanted to thank everybody. I mean, we really believe we have the most listened to Eagles podcast, and we could not accomplish that or achieve that without our loyal listeners who come back and who give us great feedback. And we just want to thank all of you. I think it's a wonderful accomplishment, not just for Inside the Birds and Adam and I, but all the listeners and the people who interact with us, whether it's on the podcast, on our Facebook group, on our Facebook page, through Twitter, wherever you reach us. We are very much appreciative of what we've been able to build and to be able to share that with our listeners.
Yeah, so we want to thank Josh Weinfeld, who is our marketing director. He oversees everything that we're doing. Mm-hmm. And Hunter Brody, who's our executive producer of our show, and makes sure the sound sounds good, edits everything, does a great job of getting it up very, very quickly. And obviously the listeners, Geoff, they're the ones who really mold our show. They tell us what they want to know. So then we cover it and we go find out. We tap our sources, and then we knew when we became a two-person show last February of 19, that we had the chance to do something really special in terms of just you and I. Our friend Bill Osborne was unable to be with us. He's doing well, but we became a 2-person show. And then we try to figure out what people want. They want inside information, or they want to learn. The big thing is we teach someone, we give you information. We give you guys information every show, whether it's getting Trey Thomas on to explain offensive line play or Andre Dillard. We want to know about Jadeveon Clowney's interest or lack of interest from the Eagles. We'll find out. You want to know what position Eagles have interest in. People want to know what's going to happen in free agency. We give you the answers to the test before the answers are out there. That's what you guys want from us. You basically told us, so we appreciate it all. And Geoff, onward and upward, my friend. We're doing well. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Now, if I could just say, Hunter Brody, we do thank him. He is a pain in the ass. I don't know about you working with him. No, I'm just kidding. We love Hunter. He's great. I thank him. I don't want to forget to thank also Phil Gallinaw, who is an intern for Josh Weinfeld, as you mentioned. And Phil does a lot of behind-the-scenes work for us, too. And, of course, Andrew DeCecco, who's been writing for InsideTheBirds.com, providing great content for the website.
And our website, yeah.
And I think that's one thing we're probably the most proud of, is that we're a podcast, we're a YouTube channel, we're a website, and we're partnered with 97.3 in a way to be ITB, to give you ITB radio every day, 4:00 on 97.3 ESPN. One of us three does an interview with Mike Gill and Hunter Brody there. So four ways to get ITB content.
Right. Speaking of that ITB TV content, go to our YouTube page. And by the way, subscribe, because you get the alert when we post any interview that we do, any content. And by the way, all the interviews that we do on 97.3 South Jersey ESPN with Mike Gill, those are put up within an hour after we do them exclusively on our YouTube page. So go there. They're exclusive for about 3 or 4 hours until their station puts it up. But if you want to get it quickly, go there and listen on your way home, because some of us are now allowed to return to work. If you work from home like Geoff and I do, you can do it that way. And obviously, the big thing is our podcast, our show, we drop it every Monday and Thursday, 6 a.m. Eastern. And then what we'll do is, once the season starts, assuming it starts in September, we'll change the schedule. Then we'll make it permanent is there as well. But we appreciate all your support.
Yeah, and that's a good segue. The season starts. Hopefully it will on time. Let's get into the recent development there. So Tom Wolf, as we mentioned, has cleared professional sports teams to reopen in Pennsylvania. They've got to follow certain guidelines, I think, that are laid out by the health officials there, Adam. I mean, it's not just you come back, you get in the locker room, you do life resumes as it usually is. But the good news is that at least the ability is there. Now, how does this work as far as what you understand? Because you can't have certain teams practicing and some not, right?
Correct. So here's what happened. So Commissioner Roger Goodell was on Sirius XM NFL radio, I think the day of the draft or the day before. I can't remember now, but I remember hearing the interview, and I was not aware of the equity rule. So Commissioner Goodell explained it. He goes, look, all 32 teams have to have the ability to practice at the same time. We can't have some teams practicing and some teams not. That it's a competitive advantage for the teams that are practicing. So the way I understood it is, in terms of on the field, at least at a minimum. So just because the Eagles can return to practice with restrictions, obviously they have to do it by whatever the health codes are. Just because they may be cleared to practice in a sense, doesn't mean they'll be allowed to practice by the NFL standards. So they have to clear it with the NFL. The Jaguars and other teams of return to their building, but there's some certain protocols. And as you were alluding to, also testing. I'd like to know what kind of testing they're going to have and how often they're going to have it. But the bottom line is, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that there are a lot more questions than answers.
Yes.
From all of this. It's great that there's been clearance. What my first question would be, based on what you're saying, Adam, is, and I don't know if this information is available yet, but are there states that are still closed for professional? I have to imagine there are. Which states are closed that have NFL teams? Right. Is Louisiana open? I don't know.
Right. At Los Angeles. California is, but Los Angeles has issues. Right. So then the other issue is, one thing I do want to add is, several teams are looking for alternate training camp sites. We have not heard, and I'm going to ask what the Eagles are going to do, where they're going to have it in NovaCare or they're going to have it somewhere else. We'll find that out over the next 2 to 3 weeks. But the bottom line is, this is going to be challenging for obviously for the Eagles and other teams. But it's certainly good news. But I think there was an overreaction. They're not just snapping their fingers. Okay, they're going to practice in 2 weeks. It's just not the way it works. It's got to be cleared by the NFL, and they're going to rely on health officials. But also, you got to give everybody the same advantage. Because can you imagine if 30 teams got a head start and 2 got screwed? They can't like 2 or 3 teams won't have mandatory OTAs. Well, that's a huge advantage for the teams that can have it. You can't do that.
I agree.
So I fully expect this to be upheld by the commissioner, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, we already have teams that are going to have a natural advantage or disadvantage in that if you have a new coach or if you have a longtime veteran coach, the team with the veteran coach and the veteran QB is just going to have an advantage because of these missed camps are rough on teams that have new regimes and new quarterbacks. So you can't. I agree with. I completely can't see any realistic scenario in which some teams, even 1 or 2, are not practicing and everybody else is. So I keep hearing. I was going to say, I just keep hearing June 15th when I talk to people as like, I don't know if it's a hypothetical date or something that people think is more realistic for every state by then to have reopened for sports. I don't know that, but that's just a buzz date that I keep hearing.
It's funny. I was talking to a coordinator recently and a defensive coordinator, and he goes, we have 4 different scenarios. We don't know what one to believe. And then he was very nervous about, because he's got kids. He's like, are we going to get tested? How often are you going to get tested? What happens when you go home? What happens when you come back in your building the next day? There's so many things. This is, as a society, we've never dealt with anything like this. It's one step at a time, but at least there's some positivity, but let's not overreact to it. And we'll go from there.
All right, let's move on a little bit to something Eagles related. I want to talk about linebacker for just a minute or two, because we've spent a lot of time, Adam, talking about how they still need a backup running back and they still need to figure out what they're doing with their quote unquote left tackle and backup swing tackle situation, but we haven't really addressed linebacker as much. And I'd say there's a pretty similar state in that I don't look at the group they have now and say that this is what they're definitely going to training camp with. In fact, I looked into it a little bit this week and spoke to some sources, and one person told me that they would be shocked if Howie did not wind up adding a veteran type linebacker before the season started. Obviously, right now, everything's on. A lot of transactions are on hold just because of the shutdown. But you look at the names we've talked about: T.J. Edwards, Nate Gary, the kid they drafted, Davion Taylor, things like that. There's really not a real long-standing veteran that they've had in the past. And I don't know if a guy is definitely going to get signed and make the team, but I do expect, based on what I'm hearing, that the Eagles are very, very likely to continue to add to that position before training camp begins.
Yeah, just to understand though, Geoff, there's no timeline to add a running back or a linebacker, even a swing offensive tackle. It's before training camp, whenever that happens. Clubs now have the leverage, and that's the way that they look at it. They'll do that when the prices are right. That's typically what happens after the draft. We remember we used the example of LeGarrette Blount in 2017. He signed after the draft, around Memorial Day weekend, which just passed, by the way. And, you look at it that way. So Geoff, the only true veteran they have, and the guy was not with them last year, it's the first time he's with them, is Jatavis Brown. But other than that, they're very, very young, inexperienced, not a lot of talent linebacker, but there's probably a sense of what this could look like.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of young guys that they have some, obviously, capital invested in. And while you mentioned Jatavis Brown, that's a guy who has great athleticism. He's had injuries in the past. I think people naturally assumed when the Eagles signed him that he would be, because he's a free agent signing, he's going to get the first crack at that third linebacker spot when they're in base, when they have 3 linebackers on the field, that it's going to be TJ Edwards and it's going to be Nate Gary at weak, and that Jatavis Brown will be the strong. But I've discovered lately, and talking to a team source, that this team really likes the athleticism of Duke Riley. He's a guy that they traded for last year. I think they traded Cyprien for him in the middle of the year and got Duke Riley from Atlanta. And Riley is a guy that they really like his athleticism. And so what I was told was, if the Eagles were to start their OTAs today and come out with a first-team base defense, Riley would be the linebacker alongside Edwards and Gary, not Jatavis Brown.
Yeah, Jatavis Brown is kind of like Duke Riley, an undersized linebacker. Duke Riley's a guy, his first 2 seasons with the Falcons, he looked like he was going to be a long-term starter. And then what happened was his play regressed so much so that they said, you know what? They traded him last year, which is his 3rd year. He's no longer started for us. Let's move him. And it didn't work out. As one Falcons source told me, that Duke thought he was a little bit better than probably the Falcons thought he was. And Duke kind of fell out of favor. Not a bad guy or anything, but they were down on him. And he's gotten a second life here. He stood out in special teams when he got traded here. Again, the guy was a draft pick. The guy's got talent, and he's pretty athletic.
Right.
Former LSU Tiger. I mean, look, the guy played in the SEC. He turns just 26. The only good thing about the Eagles linebackers, though, Geoff, is they're very young. No, they don't have anyone who's older than 26. And they have an opportunity. Duke Riley was a 3rd-round pick, Geoff.
Yeah, 17. I was going to say they're young, and they do have athleticism. I mean, they may not be
a ton of it. Yeah,
they may not be blue chip linebackers, but Riley, as you talked about, athletic. Jatavius Brown, very athletic, but he's been hurt. And obviously, the kid they drafted in the 3rd round, Davion Taylor, I mean, that guy oozes speed and quickness and athleticism, but he just doesn't have a lot of seasoning at that position, and it's going to be a little bit of an uphill climb for him, at least as a rookie. So I guess, Adam, if you look at their nickel, which they're in 60% of the time, 55% of the time, I have to think Edwards is actually going to come off the field in nickel, and maybe you'll see Gary and Riley, or Gary and Jatavius Brown, or maybe Riley and Brown. I mean, they have some optionality here to figure out who their best fits are in that position.
Yeah, probably going to be Gary and Riley, or Gary and Brown. Riley is probably the most talented linebacker. He had some good tape the first 2 years. Last year, before the trade, he got benched. He was not playing well. But this kid's gifted, and he's their best. He's their most talented linebacker. Doesn't mean best. They don't have a best linebacker. They'll figure that out as time goes along. But Nate Gary, once again, and by the way, final year of his rookie deal. It's amazing. He was drafted the year in the 5th round. The Eagles won the Super Bowl, and he's still starting. It's not something I would have predicted a year ago. I got that one wrong. I didn't think there was any way that hell that would happen, but they have what they have. And as there's a scouting term. Nate Gary's this type of guy. When you have him, you're looking for someone to replace him, and he keeps beating those guys out. So, good for Nate.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, he has an opportunity to earn an extension if he plays better.
Technically, yes. And he's eligible for one. Yep.
And I could see the Eagles wanting to give him a very team-friendly extension, as provided that he, continues to progress, because he's not going to be a guy who takes up a lot of cap space. So
no, it would cost him very little. But that's it. The Eagles are right now only have 8 linebackers on the roster. They have 3 of those 8 are undrafted free agents. Singleton, obviously, Dante Olson, and TJ Edwards, who should, barring a miracle, I mean, he's going to be their middle linebacker. But teams are so little in base, it doesn't really matter. Eagles are a big nickel team, and that's not going to change. But the back end and the disguise is going to change. It's something we've been hinting at for about 6 months. The people I trust tell me Schwartz finally has given the talent that he needs, and he now is a true number 1 corner. And you're gonna like this defense a lot better than last year. Last year was too many failures, too many excuses. They have better talent now, and their front could be incredible.
All right, that's good. Let's move on and talk about the offensive coaching staff. We're going to go through all of the coaches, especially the new ones, talk about what their jobs are, what their responsibilities are, and answer a lot of questions that have been asked of us about the coaching staff for the last several weeks and months. Before we do that, I want to remind everybody to download the DraftKings Sportsbook and Casino app now and use promo code ITB to play risk-free up to $200 at casino games for your first 24 hours, all right? You got casino games, and ITB will risk-free everything. $200 for your first 24 hours of casino play on DraftKings Sportsbook. Got to be 21 or older, Pennsylvania only, in partnership with Hollywood Casino and Penn National Racecourse. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, let's get into it. I think we should probably start with the head coach, Adam. And he's probably the guy that people would know the most about because he's obviously been here since 2016. But he has newer people around him. And I wonder, we had a great question that we answered in the last podcast, Adam, just about Doug and using Jalen Hurts, and would he be is he going to try to be eager to get him out there immediately? And, I've always been intrigued by Doug's aggression as a head coach. And I remember when he got the job originally, and I knew some people in Kansas City, and I said, is he basically an Andy Reid clone? And the response I kept getting was, well, he is a lot like Andy philosophically, except that he's much more aggressive. I didn't realize. I thought aggressive meant maybe more downfield or likes to throw the ball,
Right.
But I think what I came to soon realize he meant as a play caller, as someone who goes for it on fourth down, just as someone who goes for the jugular.
Yeah. So Chief Source told me that the one thing, because I knew Doug a little bit. I had a nice talk with him in 2015 at the owners' meetings. He was there because there was a symposium for assistant coaches who wanted to be head coaches at it. But I never thought the year later he'd be a head coach anywhere. Mm-hmm. But I was talking to a chief source who said to me that the one thing that he knew about Doug that he had was swag. He was very confident, cocky in a good way, unbelievably positive, no matter what happens. So a really interesting story, Geoff, was the flight home after Wentz tore his ACL. Doug is in the building the next morning when it was gloom and doom. The flight home was just awful. Because you lose your starting quarterback, your season's over. That's not that everyone was saying that, but you could. That's what some people were thinking. Mm-hmm. That they know it was to the point where you're like, okay, Nick Foles, journeyman quarterback. We're hoping for the best. We know we're going to the playoffs because they had clinched the division that night. But the fact of the matter is, Geoff, they knew they were in trouble. But Doug, a high-ranking team source told me, Doug's positivity in part saved their season. He would not let anyone get down, no matter how down they might have been on the flight home in that morning. He really wasn't going to hear of it. It's kind of like what Dick Vermeil did, other than the crying when Trent Green got hurt. Mm-hmm. He said they were going to rally around him, Geoff. So Doug's got this incredible ability to rally the troops and stay positive, and that permeates the building.
And I always feel like, Adam, that really made him an ideal fit to both play and coach for Andy, because that's what you hear a lot about Andy. Always stoic in the face of adversity, always calm, never lets things get him down. And Doug similarly has that attitude that's pervasive in the locker room. Obviously the Eagles have played very well when their backs were against the wall, and they always credit Doug for holding them together. Where I think we get into something that's maybe more innately Doug, and that's what you were mentioning, that kind of swagger and cockiness that doesn't always come out in the press conferences, but comes out in these actions in game day. On 4th and 1, he doesn't just always run it up the middle. Sometimes I remember he got crushed in 2016, a couple of 4th and 1 plays against the Giants. He decided to run option keepers with Carson Wentz, and then they didn't work out, and people hated it then, right? But now you look back on it and you think the Eagles play like Doug coaches. They are an aggressive team, especially when things are going well.
Yeah, it again, I'm totally floored. I was off on Doug Pederson as a head coach, but I do want to mention one thing. Mm-hmm. Not only did they have a losing record Doug's first year at 7-9, he did not have a good year. He did not do a very good job. I could just tell you there's some people that, closest situation, felt that Doug needed to have a better understanding of what it takes to win in the National Football League. Stop trying to be everybody's best friend. Mm-hmm. Just coach. And he learned the hard way. He needed to coach his coaches better. We'll get to the negatives. He's got a ton of positives, are way more than the negatives. But he learned a lesson. And the one thing that multiple team sources told me, Geoff, that he had to do is he had to discipline his players more. They had fear in a way that, look, you can't keep screwing up. The story that I told on our show 2 years ago, and I would probably talk in a while, but there was a practice. I think it might have been leading up to the Atlanta playoff game. And obviously in the year they won the Super Bowl, the ball hit the ground. It was one of the receivers dropped the ball, and the coaches and the players just stood there like they thought it was incomplete. And Doug lost it. Doug's like, what the bleep, whatever he said. Mm-hmm. Like, you're seeing it there. Go get the goddamn football. And coaches, what are you doing? Right. He lit into him. Coaches always tell me you can only light guys up 3 or 4 times a season. You only have so many. You can't do it all the time.
It's like padded practices. You only get so many.
Right, exactly. But to sum it up, Doug started to understand what it's like or what, because he was a former player, what you need to do to rally the troops. Sometimes you got to get after your own coaches in front of the other players. That's what a team source told me, that he was shocked because he didn't know if Doug had it in him. And he'd seen Doug get mad before, but he had not seen him go after the coaches in front of the players.
Right.
And that was good. Look, this is what you need to be able to do. You have to be fearless. And again, another thing I didn't know about him, how fearless. You alluded to it. His cockiness is also, he's fearless. Obviously, Philly Special is the best example of it as a play caller, but he doesn't quite worry about it. Sometimes he tells the media what they want to hear, but in terms of running his football team, how he handles the players, and what kind of play caller he is, the guy has some swag, and he's bullish. And this is what kind of separates him. By the way, I ranked the coaches. Someone asked us on our message board. I ranked him as the 7th best head coach, and I'm going to get into why I don't have him top 5. But he's clearly top 10. Not even arguable. He's clearly top 10.
Let me try to guess your top 6 then, really quickly.
Good.
I'm going to say you've got Belichick in there.
1.
I'm going to say you've got Peyton in there.
Yes,
Sean Payton.
He's my top 5. Yep.
I'm going to say you have Pete Carroll in there.
I have Doug over Pete Carroll. You want to know why?
Sure.
Pete Carroll's a terrific coach. Yes, he's been fired twice. Pete Carroll micromanages his offense too strongly. He's a very good head coach. I'm not doubting that.
Okay.
You can't just hide the football when you have a dynamic quarterback like Russell Wilson. They would be so much better offensively. You have no idea. Maybe they'll open up a little bit more this year, but the fact of the matter is you got to be more dynamic offensively when you've got the talent around them. And running to be a power run team from 1990, it works when you have a great defense. It worked for them with Marshawn Lynch. They don't have a great defense anymore. It's not even close.
All right, that's fair. Andy Reid in there?
Yeah, so I have Andy a spoke ahead of him.
All right, Tomlin and John Harbaugh in there.
I have John Harbaugh ahead of him.
And Tomlin too?
I have Mike Tomlin ahead of him.
All right, so Mike Tomlin. Named 5. I named your top 5 right there then. And you
remember, I have 7. Right.
So I got one more I got to figure out. Don't tell me McVay. Don't give me Sean McVay.
I don't have my list in front of me.
You don't have the list in your head.
No, I do. You name the 5.
Oh, okay.
No, you name the 5.
Right, but you said Doug was 7. Correct?
6. I have Kyle Shanahan.
Okay. I won't argue with it. I mean, oh man.
Now Doug's won a Super Bowl, though. But here's the differences. The difference is this: Kyle, and let's transfer over to the negatives. Kyle
this is perfect, by the way. Yeah.
Kyle does not let these coaching issues with his assistants happen. Doug has a major issue. It's coaching his coaches. This is something I've brought up. I learned this from 2 or 3 people. One of them was Ron Jaworski. Jaws was never talking about Doug. He's just saying one thing he learned from Dick Vermeil is that you got to coach your coaches constantly. You got to know what they're doing, what they're not doing well. Andy Reid was really good at this. Doug Pederson is not. It doesn't mean yelling. It means, hey, you watch the tape. Why aren't we doing this? Okay, let's get this corrected. Don't let it get up to the ownership level. The stuff that has happened, let me give an example. I'm going to start in 2016. I'd reported in 2016 that Doug told his staff that they're all back. 1 week later, Greg Lewis was fired. Let's fast forward 3 weeks later. Doug Pederson tells the media that everyone's back. 2 days later, 2 coaches are fired. That cannot happen. I don't know if their contracts are up or not, but they were not being brought back. We know the owner got involved. So Geoff, this cannot happen with a guy like Doug Pederson. You expect a JV coach, a guy's not very good, not a Super Bowl winning coach who's really good at what he does. This is what Doug's got to do a better job. There's no way to defend this. These are facts. He's got to be better.
I think that's a fair criticism. I also think that Kyle Shanahan is a great comp for what Doug doesn't do well, because Kyle is an elite, maybe the best run game coordinator in all of the National Football League. I mean, his run game concepts are second to none. And if there's one thing that you and I have come down on Doug over the years, even when things are going well, so we're fair on this, we've pointed out that Doug's run game typically tends to be line it up, maybe one, you send one guy in motion, but there's just not a lot of ingenuity to it. He's got a great offensive line. He usually has some pretty good running backs, or at least good enough to pick up, positive yards. And he's kind of gotten by on that. and we'll talk about some of the new additions to the coaching staff and what that might do. But that's always kind of perplexed us. And I give a shout out to Billy Osborne who put us kind of onto that. How Bill would call it kind of that lazy, just run out of the shotgun running scheme that the Eagles would constantly showcase.
And Billy was a former Eagle practice squad player under Buddy Ryan for 2 years,
right?
Who played at Pitt, South Jersey athlete superstar. And Bill was with us for our first season. And the one thing that Bill pointed out, which technically hasn't really changed, Doug does not get with the run game, could get a little bit more better. He get better with disguise.
Sure.
And as we transfer into, we'll get into the coaching staff and the new additions in a second, but that's the one area where Doug's just got to be better. And it's not a magic formula to coach your coaches. You got to understand what you need to get out of them. You've been around football your whole life. You played in college football, you played in pro football, you're an assistant coach, you're a high school coach, you're a high school head coach before you came back to the pros to be an assistant coach. You're now a head coach, one of the top 10. You've won a Super Bowl as a head coach. But if you want to go from very good to great, you won't do it until you understand that your coaches have to be coaches better. You cannot accept that, okay, well, the owner got involved and you know what? Hey, it's his team. No, you don't let it get to that level. The elite coaches control everything and never let that happen.
Right. That's fair. Let's go on to the rest of the staff and talk about Press Taylor. Here's a guy who was the quarterbacks coach last year, and by the middle of the year or late in November, lost to Miami early December, you heard his name right up there with Mike Groh and anybody else that they got to go. And instead, he winds up getting promoted in the offseason to add the title of passing game coordinator to his title, along with quarterbacks coach. So clearly there's a divide between how the fans feel about Press Taylor and how the organization feels about Press Taylor. And you and I both know that the quarterback, Carson Wentz, has strong feelings for Press Taylor. So that always helps.
Yeah. So look, let's start with what you just said. There's no question that the organization likes him. He is one of 7 coaches that were held over from Chip Kelly's staff on offense and defense. He's grown up in the Eagle system, Chip system, and now obviously Doug Pederson's West Coast system, which has been somewhat bastardized. You know, it's only terminology is West Coast. It's nothing like the old West Coast, Dink and Dunk, Bill Walsh. But that's where that's where the origins come from. And Press Taylor's a smart kid who, for whatever reason, they're not giving, quite frankly, they brought in they were looking at some other guys to be coordinator. It just didn't work out with the guy that's at USC, Graham Harrell. Graham Harrell would have been, I'm told, he would have been the OC, but he decided to stay there. I never got a reason why he stayed at USC other than he wouldn't be calling plays or Doug would. Maybe that is the reason why. But anyway, they do like Press a lot. Now, Press, this will be his 3rd year running the room. He did not run the room when Frank Reich and John DiFilippo were in Philly. He was more of a quality control coach his first 2 seasons under Doug, and they gave him the room. He was assistant quarterbacks coach, but really DiFilippo ran the room. Press has run the room the last 2 years. As you said, he's close to Carson. But something we pointed out from our sources, which I thought was terrific, one guy in particular saw when Carson was not at his best, he had issues with his footwork and how he would not reset on RPOs and certain situations where his feet were not lined up correctly. And sometimes this was clearly either not corrected or he fell into bad habits. When Carson was struggling, Geoff, there was a midway point in the season where he wasn't playing as well until he played brilliantly to the last quarter of the season. It was like, I don't know how he's doing this with these backups, but he was developing some bad habits a little bit, and they just were not out of him yet. And you just wondered, as one source said, how is he being coached? Because the way that Reich and DiFilippo coached them, this was not happening. And they coached hard, Geoff. He was coached hard. And Press Taylor, talking to team sources, he just doesn't coach as hard. And I think Carson is the type A, like Aaron Rodgers. You need to get on his bleep sometimes. You need to do that. And I don't know that I'm not, it's not like you and I work there, but from talking to people who know him and who've worked around that and are still there, that's one area you just don't know if he's able to do that.
Yeah, and to me, this remains the unanswered question going into 2020. I mean, he's got this passing game coordinator title. We know the franchise organization likes him. but we did notice, we saw even when Carson had started to turn it around after that Miami loss and play better, there were still some footwork issues, some overthrow, some things that we thought made him not 100% back to being the Carson you were looking for. And so you wonder, not only what does Press do this year, how can he help get Carson back to the level he was in 2017, but Press is going to be instrumental in the development of Jalen Hurts. And as many personnel people and also Greg Cassell told you and I, Hurts throughout his college career was mostly kind of a one read and run type of quarterback. He's got a lot of development needed. And is Press Taylor going to be the guy presiding over that development, coaching Jalen Hurts the way to get this kid to develop quickly enough to be a number 2 quarterback by year 2?
Yeah, look, Press Taylor has got an enormous job here. And I know we had a couple good questions over the last couple of months. Are there too many coaches in Carson's ear? Doug, I know this. Doug typically just lets the quarterback coach and do his thing. Obviously, he's going to pop in there and will help coach, but the guy's typically going to be in his ear as the quarterback's coach. So Press Taylor is going to be in there quite a bit. Now, let's move to Rich Scangarelo. Scangarelo is yet another former play caller, like Marty Morningwood, like Andrew Brunner. Scangarelo is brought in, so they're not going to change the offense. Doug Pederson's right. I know he scoffs at how the offense is going to change. We never said it's going to change, but there are going to be new ideas there. And Scangarelo, he brings in his version. He'll bring ideas from Kyle Shanahan's West Coast offense. There's no question that he's going to be partially do that. But also, Scangarelo was a coordinator in college at Wagner, and what you like is, Geoff,
Powerhouse Wagner,
but
Powerhouse. I'm sorry, I'm just kidding.
Are they the Seahawks? I can't remember what they were called. Wagner, I don't know, but he brings in the college mentality as well, spread concepts, as well as pro concepts, and by the way, talking to someone who's worked with him, very, very opinionated. This is what Doug needs. Doug needs a strong personality. This is what you need in that offense, just the offensive coaching staff, Geoff. He's a guy, and I spoke to someone who's coached with him. It's something this guy really admires him. He admires him quite a lot.
Well, I mean, I hope that Scangarello, to me, I think he's, of all the names that they've added, he to me adds the most intrigue because of what we said before. We've always felt that Doug could really use a little spice to his running game, and if Scangarello comes from that Shanahan tree, and that it's not just running, right? It's motion, it's misdirection, it's trying to deceive the eyes of the defense with all sorts of scheming, because I don't want to make it think that all you do is just do some misdirection. It's how your tackles and guards run and pull in maybe the opposite direction of the play that you're going. I mean, Shanahan does so many different things, and that's what kind of makes him a genius at scheming. But the one thing is that you see his players get the ball in space a lot. And take Deebo Samuel, for example, and this is not even about the run. Deebo had 800 receiving yards and about 150 to 200 rushing yards as a rookie. That's a pretty good season right there.
And run after the catch. Deebo is not fast. He's just really good running after the catch.
So I want to see Jalen Reagor use like Deebo, but with that explosion, and feel like he can even have a better year.
And Kyle is the master of taking lesser talent and figuring out a way to get him open. I remember what Carlos Hyde told me. I talked to Carlos Hyde when he was with the Niners. He was only with Shanahan, I think, for 1 year, but he said he had never run through so much space in his life. He said he just loved it because it was the one-cut system from his father, Mike Shanahan. And he goes, he loved it because he's like, I make one cut and there's so much space because I've never had this much space. And you're right, Geoff. I'm so glad you brought this up because that is what he could bring in, plus whatever concepts he has. Now, let's move on to Marty Morningwood.
For his third go-round.
It is amazing. Mr. Sicklick, yes, Mr. Sicklick. I love Marty. Former head coach, former coordinator, worked with Steve Young. One thing we should mention, he could bring in Greg Roman's concepts. He worked with Greg in Baltimore. Greg Roman, according to NFL GM, has the most sophisticated run game he's ever seen. And this guy's been in the league 25 years with one job or another. He goes, it's just unbelievable what he does. And you mentioned how great Kyle is. So again, you meld Marty. He's a senior offensive consultant is his title. It is a little bit of a side, as some people have pointed out. Marty has the same agent as Doug Pederson, Prestero, Drew Staley, but he's really brought in for ideas. And he knows, obviously, he knows Doug, he knows the building. He's a former offensive coordinator. You know, another thing is he's got more experience than any of them. What he could tell you is if they're playing a particular defense that Marty's seen before, hey, here's what we called against this defense to beat them. That really helps. Oh, by the way, work with Michael Vick, Steve Young, Donovan McNabb, Lamar Jackson for a year. So he's got experience, Geoff, with all types of quarterbacks, shapes and sizes, and arm strength and athleticism.
Right.
This is really important.
So his title is senior offensive consultant, Adam, and I'm not 100% sure of everything that entails. Is he going to be on the field every day with this team like a coach or / coach advisor, or is he someone that is at home looking at tape, calling Doug throughout the week, sharing concepts? Because I don't really know what to make of his ability to impact this team unless he's there every day.
Yeah, I was told he would be more. He would not be in building as much as the other coaches.
Okay.
We'll see what this entails when we get there. We're so far away, but
right.
It's just another idea guy. As one coaching source told me, Doug loves idea guys. He wants them. He actually says, guys, I need more ideas. So this is, and what you like is no idea is a bad idea. Some are just better than others. So that's good. This is, the other things that, a couple of things I didn't mention about Doug, and this ties into all these things. Doug is a good listener. Doesn't mean he's going to do everything that you suggest. It could be, look, with Philly Special is a great example. He wants to hear, because he's, I remember Zach Ertz telling me he'd run through a wall for Doug because Doug listens. He doesn't know everything. When you think you know everything, you're not going to be better because you're not seeing it correct. You're not getting the clear picture of everything that's going on. Right. So he's such a good listener, and it makes him a very good head coach. And I think that he be willing to, or whether he wasn't told he had to bring these guys in, it's his call. But bringing in guys with different ideas. Andrew Brunner, and past game analyst is his title. Another guy as we transition here.
Wait, real quick, one thing. I just want to close on one thing with Marty, because I don't see any negatives to Marty. I think he's, obviously for all the reasons you mentioned, it's good to have him as an ideas guy. But one area I am reluctant to attach him to is to what we saw in Baltimore last year. I mean, what happened was Marty was the offensive coordinator, I believe. And when they decided they wanted to
2 years ago, 2 years
ago with Lamar Jackson and run that kind of offense, they put the offense in the hands, as you mentioned, of Greg Roman. Marty took a step back, and he wasn't even with, I think, the Ravens last year.
He didn't want to be. They were going to reassign him, I think, and he just
right. And he didn't want to do it. So I don't know how much he can bring of last year's Ravens offense and what.
Well, it's been like this. It's 2 years, right? Like a year and a half. But no, he definitely knows. He did work with Greg, and he knows what kind of ideas that he has. He'll bring in some of that. But Marty's worked with so many different quarterbacks. Running quarterbacks,
advantage, certainly.
Stationary quarterbacks. Carson's kind of combo because he will run. But again, more ideas. This could be so much fun. And by the way, he worked with Deshaun Jackson. He knows Deshaun. If Deshaun is healthy, and by the way, you should see, he does not look like the same player we watched when he was bony and he came in 2008. He is filled out. His thighs are much bigger. He's much bigger physically. So hopefully for a change, he could stay on the field.
All right. Andrew Brunner, you mentioned him. He is the passing game analyst. What's interesting about Brunner, as you mentioned, obviously his pedigree is the spread offense. He coached at Fordham under Joe Moorhead, if I'm not mistaken, who then went on to Penn State. And Joe Moorhead presided over that great Penn State offense that had Saquon Barkley and Trace McSorley and the tight ends, and went to the Rose Bowl and played against USC. And then Moorhead went to Mississippi State, right? And then brought Brunner with him there, I believe, from Fordham, if I'm not mistaken. Do I have that right?
Yeah. He did a really good job at Fordham. I talked to someone who knows him really well and said that he's a bright guy. His understanding was he's going to bring in concepts from college football. spread concepts, different stuff that the Eagles have not been running.
Mm-hmm.
And this solves the sort of offensive quality control. Not that you don't have them, but this is a guy who's called plays before.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very important. And this is again, this has nothing to do with Carson Wentz. He's not coaching Carson Wentz. Marty Morningwood is not coaching Carson Wentz. Press Taylor and Scangarelo are probably the two guys who are mainly going to be in there.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. I'm not worried about any voices in Carson's head. This is going to be fun, folks. If everybody's healthy, these are good people, but these are good football people. I've talked to countless people who've worked with these guys. There will be no issues.
You know what this reminds me of? Andrew Brunner's role is similar, and maybe this is where Doug got the idea. But when they all went out to Kansas City after Andy got fired, he went to Kansas City and he traded for Alex Smith. One of his coaching moves was to go hire Chris Ault, who had been the coach at Nevada when Colin Kaepernick was there and had brought the pistol offense that Kaepernick was running there.
Pistol concepts.
You know,
Yep.
Yeah, pistol concepts, and they called him the godfather of the pistol. And Andy hired him to the Kansas City coaching staff to help bring a lot of those college pistol concepts to the Chiefs offense. And as much as we love to talk about what Chip Kelly did here in Philadelphia from new concepts standpoint, what Andy did in Kansas City very early, as soon as he got Alex Smith, was very different from what you saw from Andy here in Philly. I mean, he really went deep into the college game and leaned heavily on those concepts. And I think Andy has done as much to advance the way football is right now as Chip or anybody else in the league.
By the way, Brad Childress was added to that staff. Brad helped Andy for a couple years there before he went with Matt Nagy. Now he's out of coaching. But look, that's probably some of what Doug was thinking when he brought these coaches in. Some I know for a fact were suggested to him. And then some, he knew Marty, obviously. I don't know who knew Brunner. That one was really interesting. But again, you're getting so many different views. I love it. College guys who coached in college, and also like Brunner. Marty's a former head coach with the Lions. He's been on and off Eagle staff over the years. You mentioned, been a coordinator in San Francisco. Worked with the Hall of Famer and Steve Young. This is a guy who's seen it all and done it all. And this is what great coaches do. You bring in guys who have different ideas. And I remember Dick Vermeil saying something which I thought was brilliant. He said that I wanted guys around me that were capable of taking my job. Not that these guys are going to take his job, but they were so smart, they're going to bring in so many ideas. That this is the way that you do it. And good job by Doug.
Yeah, definitely. All right, we're going to move on to some of the other coaches. Right now, we'll take a quick pause, though, and let me tell you about our friends, PHLSportsNation.com. They are constantly enhancing the fan experience with their coverage of the Eagles, Sixers, Phillies, and Flyers. They have great podcasts, just wonderful content that is written by the fans and for the fans. So make sure you're checking out PHLSportsNation.com. All right, we thank them for their partnership. And also, we're going to pause right now for a quick word from some of our great sponsors. All right, Adam, as we continue with the offensive coaching staff, we move on to the offensive line and Geoff Stoutland, very interesting guy. One of those guys that you mentioned, 7 coaches who were retained that were brought in originally by Chip Kelly.
Yes, and that includes Matt Harper as assistant receivers coach.
Right.
Yep. Look, and I'll tell you what. And what the Eagles did was as soon as they knew they were firing Chip, they extended a bunch of those contracts or rolled it. If they had a rollover, they rolled it over. Whatever they needed to do. And Geoff Stoutland was obviously one of them, and not a secret. They're in love with Geoff Stoutland. Nothing gets done on the offensive line without Geoff being consulted. Andre Dillard, he was heavily involved in it. What can I tell you? The guy's done a great job, highly respected. Give Chip Kelly credit. Found a guy who was a terrific coach at Alabama. I don't think Geoff, did he ever coach the NFL? I don't think so, but
no, I don't believe he did. He's I know he's from New York City, right? He's either Brooklyn or Staten Island.
Yeah, he's Staten Island.
Yeah.
Yep.
Which is where Wagner University, by the way, is located, if I'm not mistaken. Right? You mentioned Wagner before.
Yeah. So look, Stoutland's a terrific coach. He just has a way about him. And by the way, listen to what Trey Thomas said on ITB TV. He breaks Geoff down, but I can just tell you from talking to the Eagles about him since 2013, highly respected, gets the job done, and finds a way to get the most out of these guys. And look, Jordan Mailata would not be an Eagle without Geoff Stoutland. I mean, I don't. One of these days, we'll spend 15 minutes on the Mailata story. If Mailata makes it, and there's a very good chance that he does, it'll be one of the best stories in Eagles history in terms of a draft pick and trading up for a guy. Geoff Stoutland deserves, I don't want to see the most credit. It's probably not being fair, but it's right up there for a lot of credit, bottom line.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's interesting. Stoutland's interesting to me, Adam, because as you mentioned, the organization loves him. They love him. They think he is fantastic. And what you saw last year and really the year before from Mailata, his ability to pick up all the concepts quickly, and you had people all of a sudden saying he was going to be a real breakout player. I know that the organization really credits Stoutland's work with him, with Mailata, on getting him that prepared. Considering the fact that the guy had never played anything other than rugby before, which is an accomplishment on itself. At the same time, I know the old guard, right? If you talk to some guys who played for Andy, because Chip brought in Geoff Stoutland, they seem a little bit more reluctant to I think he's just different than Juan. Everybody swears by Juan Castillo's coaching, and Juan was a technician, a driller, almost military way about it. Drill. And all those guys who played for Juan will tell you that that's the reason why they felt that they're always so prepared. Everything was drilled into them. And you do feel like sometimes maybe whether it's coaching or preparation, that maybe that's where Juan and a guy like Geoff Stoutland are a little bit different.
Yeah, so very few players that Geoff has had his hands on since 13 have not made it. You look at Lane Johnson, by the way. He's been there the whole time with Stout. And Lane will go down as one of the best offensive linemen in Eagles history, potential Hall of Famer. Brandon Brooks, the Texans didn't want. Brandon Brooks is an all-pro, tremendous football player. Kelsey he got his career revival under Geoff Stoutland. Isaac Seumalo looked like he might be a bust his first 2 years. We told with the first couple shows, and we did an ITB, we have the scoop that he had the biggest improvement of any offensive player in 2018 in the offseason. He's been a solid football player. You mentioned Mailata and Nate Herbig, who makes it. He's an undrafted free agent. Matt Pryor, who's playing out of position, did a decent job. And look, now he's got more challenges. Jack Driscoll, obviously. Andre Dillard, we'll see what happens in year 2 with him. And then a bunch of undrafted free agents. So look, Geoff is one of the best in the National Football League. He's also, by the way, I'm told, one of the highest paid offensive line coaches in the league. And by the way, he deserves it.
Yeah, well, we will. He's got a lot to him. He's not just the offensive line coach, but he's the run game coordinator. I kind of look forward to seeing the development of because the Eagles have a lot of young offensive linemen now, whether it's Matt Pryor, whether it's Tego Wanogo, whether it's Jack Driscoll, Nate Herbig. I mean, they have a ton of guys that they've added over the last 2 or 3 years who are waiting for their turn. And obviously, and Jordan Mailata being one of them, we'll find out if Geoff Stoutland really can mold the next group that becomes the Eagles offensive line of the future. Let's move on to Deuce Staley. He is the running backs coach, but he's also the assistant head coach. He wears a lot of hats. I mean, he really works with the running backs. There's not a running back I've ever heard say anything bad about Deuce. And much like we talk about with Stoutland, a lot of them credit Deuce's ability to coach them up, coach them hard into why they succeed on the field on Sundays.
Yeah, being a former football player, at one time one of the better running backs in the National Football League, I think that helps. He relates to them. He's obviously much older than they are, but he's been there. He's done that. It always helps to have a former player coaching today's players. He just knows how to handle them, and he could discipline them. And as one high-ranking team source said to me recently, he said, look, whoever we bring at running back, Deuce will be able to handle him. And the guy brought up the LeGarrette Blount stuff. When Blount came in at 17, you heard some stuff. He had some baggage. But you know what? Blount he turned out to be one of their team leaders. Like, who would have thunk it? Deuce just has a way about him. And by the way, he decides who rotates in and out. That's his job responsibility in terms of game day responsibility. And in addition to coaching the players, he decides who comes in and out. And he's highly respected. You know, to pay him more money, they gave him the assistant head coach, title. But he's a running backs coach. That's what his role is.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see what happens for Deuce in the next year or two. We've obviously, both of us have reported on the pod that he's really looking to accelerate in his career and kind of shed the label of just being a running backs coach. He wants to be a head coach. He wants that opportunity to prove himself. You know, we've talked about whether or not, you know, he knows enough about passing to be an OC or not. He has that kind of personality where I don't even know if he'd have to be a great OC. He could just be a very good head coach and have wonderful assistants underneath him, like a Mike Tomlin or so, although Mike Tomlin's a great defensive coach.
Someone told me, Geoff, I just want to say that someone told me on the Doug staff that Deuce Staley will be a head coach someday because he's got tremendous command and presence. That matters. And a shame on the league to not identify him as one of the top minority candidates. You and I could spend an hour on how bad the NFL's done at identifying candidates. This is what it's really pathetic. And Agreed. Deuce should be interviewed. He should be getting interviews. It's an absolute joke. It pisses me off. I don't even know Deuce, by the way. I've never talked to a guy in my life other than say hello.
Really? Wow. Never?
I don't know Deuce.
Guy.
I know how well he's respected by not just by the Eagles, just by other teams. And he's a really good coach. He's really sharp. And he's got great command, and he's a good manager of people. He'd be a really good head coaching candidate.
Yeah, and by the way, he's going to get a chance to once again prove the impact that he can make as a coach because, as we've talked about, Eagles go into this year. They've got Miles Sanders, who looks like he's a very promising young talent who Deuce has helped groom. But after that, a lot of young guys who are going to get a chance to showcase what they do and need Deuce's tutelage. All right, the big guy, the new name, right, that a lot of people have been interested in, wide receivers coach Aaron Moorhead, the sixth coach. Is it sixth coach in 6 years now?
6 in 6 years. Bicknell.
Oh, my God. Bicknell, you're right.
Bicknell, Chips. Yeah. Bobby Bicknell is now with the Bengals as a receivers coach, doing a good job there. Right. Greg Lewis, who got fired at 16. Mike Groh got promoted after 17. Gunter Brewer, who it didn't work out well, we reported. We don't need to get into it. Just didn't work out. Carson Walsh. Now, again, this is where Doug screwed up. He should have known that Carson Walsh was not ready to be a receivers coach. He couldn't run a room. And the guy they got, who's way bigger physically and also playing the National Football League, and Aaron Moorhead, he's the 6th in 6 years.
That's amazing. I mean, that's just
it can't happen. Look, I'm
trying to think of another team that has had 6 different.
I don't know.
I mean, it's like the Browns and quarterbacks.
Well, look, and I'll defend Doug in one way. Bicknell was not going to be retained because he was from. They had Greg Lewis didn't work out. Mike Groh they promoted. Gunter Brewer was a mistake. Carson Walsh was a mistake.
Right. Greg Lewis didn't work out because they needed somebody to say there was a problem. That's my opinion. You know, Dorial Green Beckham, he had Greg Lewis, not Greg Lewis, Nelson Aguilar as a rookie who was just a mess, and Jordan Matthews, Paul Turner. I mean, come on. He went to Kansas City, and there's not been a problem with him since. So
no, well, he obviously
inherited in front of that.
Well, Greg Lewis inherited a great group.
Inherited good. Come on. Yeah. So what is it? Is it the players or is it the coach?
Players clearly weren't good enough, but I don't know Greg Lewis, and we'll just move on. I'm not going to comment on some of the stuff I heard. It's just Greg's doing a good job in Kansas City. Good, and by the way, he's got a Super Bowl ring there.
He does.
In the Super Bowl, didn't he score? Did he score in the Super Bowl for Jack?
He did. He caught the last touchdown, if I'm not mistaken, in the comeback. It was like a 60-yarder for McNabb. That made it a one.
He's doing a good job in Kansas City. What I think was it was easy to point the finger at him because they were 7-9, and again, Greg was told, all the other coaches, everyone was told they were coming back in a season-ending meeting. Then a week later, he's not. Like, you can't have that. Like this, as I mentioned earlier, 3 years later, the same thing happens. Like, you got to be better than that.
Right.
This is why we'll see. We've pointed out what Doug's faults are. The strengths are so much better than the weaknesses, but no one's perfect. I hope this last episode that happened after the season was over, that was very public. I hope now Doug has learned his lesson to coach his coaches better.
There you go. What's the best thing you've heard about Aaron Moorhead? Because I feel like a couple of years ago when they hired Gunter Brewer and it didn't work out, we would say, not we or other would say, well, that's what happens when you go and get a guy just from college and then expect him to perform well in the NFL. In a sense, they're doing that with Aaron, but at least Aaron played in the NFL, so I can at least.
He also was a coaching intern for the. Yeah, he did work for the
Saints,
Colts,
right? Oh no, the Colts.
Coaching intern. So sometimes we get lucky doing the show. I happened to talk to someone who worked with him last season at Vanderbilt, tremendous presence. This guy is not a friend of Aaron's. What I ask people to do is, I don't care. Leave your friendship if you know the guy personally. I don't care about that. Just tell me what you think of him. You're not going to know I talk to you or who you are. Just tell me what you think. And he goes, look, this guy's got presence.
Right.
And Carson Walsh did not. Carson Walsh would be a better assistant receivers coach. Aaron is ready to do this. He's got a plan. He's disciplined. He's detailed. As you said, he played for the Colts. He was at the Super Bowl. Very well-respected guy, but now he's running his own room at the NFL level. And you don't know about a guy until he's got to do it on his own.
Right.
And all the positivity that I've heard, and by the way, so far so good from talking to people who've worked with him already, but you're not going to know until we get them on the field. Like I knew when I watched Mike Groh work and teach receivers, I was like, oh God, boy, they got this one right. As Mike is a receivers coach. Gunnar Brewer was Mac Holland's receivers coach at North Carolina, coached Des Bryant at Oklahoma State. Hey, the guy's a good receivers coach from college. Bring him in. He's an older guy, by the way. Didn't work. His energy didn't. The way he coached them was not appreciated by players, and they moved on. So they got it wrong. I don't blame him for that one. Who knew?
Right.
But
now, also important to remember that Aaron Moorhead, it's correct. He came from Vanderbilt, where he was the wide receivers coach. I believe before that, he was at Texas A&M in the same position.
By the way, comments from the Texas A&M guys who are in the NFL were really good. One player in particular, a good receiver now, was very complimentary. Let's just put it this way. I kind of when coaches know coaches, right? When I ask coaches point blank, is this guy good enough? And the guy who worked with him at Vanderbilt said he's ready. He goes, I'm positive. He goes, I'm just telling you, I wasn't around the guy long, but you kind of know when you're around people if they've got it or not. He's got it. But I would fast forward this and say, look, that's great. But until you're actually in a game and you go game by game by game, you stack games ahead, you need to see what needs to be corrected and does the coach get it corrected? But so far, so good.
All right, let's round this out with Justin Peelle, the tight ends coach, another one who was retained from Chip Kelly's staff. Now, Justin played collegiately at Oregon, so that automatically qualified him to be on Chip Kelly's staff, and he's managed to stick around. He's done a nice job.
It's funny. I talked to Justin, a couple years ago. I just wanted to know. I didn't know him at all. I just happened to we were waiting. I think we were going to the combine or something. So I said, hey, how did you get to Philly? He goes, I didn't really know Chip. I didn't play for him. But you mentioned, you're right, former Oregon player. And you know what? He's still here and he does a good job. He's not a yeller or screamer, but he was a long-time tight end coach. Tight end player in the NFL. You might remember him from the Falcons and the Chargers. Right. He's got presence. He's good with technique. The players love him, and he's just a good coach. And this, by and large, and we'll do that in our next show, the defensive staff. This is, by and large, a really good offensive staff, but we need to find out more about how these new guys work together. That should work very well. And you got to see how the new guys who've come in here, like Aaron Moorhead, how well do they indoctrinate themselves with the staff? And can they get these guys to take the next level? Because Aaron Moorhead's coaching with a lot of young guys, and they've got to get on the field. Moorhead might be the most important offensive coach on the staff.
Yeah, I think the biggest spotlight is on him and on wide receivers. And, I think it's I don't know what the ratios have been in the past, but if you include Doug Pederson and Deuce Staley and Justin Peelle and Aaron Moorhead, that's now 4 of the main coaches who have played in the NFL who are now coaches. You mentioned how important that is to be able to relate to NFL players. I think that's really interesting about this staff is that more than half, because Marty, I'm taking out, and Brunner, because I don't know if they're on the field every single day, but you add in just the position coaches. I like the fact that they have both NFL experience and now coaching experience.
Right, college experience, right, and
college experience, yes.
Yeah, the one thing I would add is this. If this doesn't work out and this team is I'd be shocked if Djax is relatively healthy. He plays, for him, that'd be 12 games, the 16. But if these young kids get on the field like Rager and Hightower, and the tight ends are healthy and the offensive line is relatively healthy, and Sanders is who we think he is, a special player, running back, I'd be shocked if this is not a dynamic offense, one of the best offenses in Eagles history. I know that's kind of crazy to say.
No,
how well some of the offenses were. What's that?
It's not. It's not crazy to say
I
at
think it's
all.
got a chance to be maybe the best.
I listen. I remind everybody, as much as people were down on last year's offense, they were the fourth best offense in the red zone. I'm sorry, on third down, and the third best offense in the red zone. I mean, for as much as they missed, for as much criticism I got, situational football they have been excellent at. Not just last year, but in the last 2, 3, or 4 years. So, if, as you're mentioning, guys stay healthy, this should be a very good offense, and it should be back
Oh,
toward
great. Top five.
something like we
Top
saw a couple of
five.
years ago. It should
Right.
be.
And you made a great point earlier before we get out of here about the concepts that they're going to bring in
Mm-hmm.
with Scangarelo and Marty and whatever Press Taylor has that. Obviously, it's going to be really the game plan is going to be Doug Pederson, Press Taylor, and Scangarelo pretty much. And then guys will have different ideas over time, like Marty, like Brunner.
Yep.
And then you know what? One thing that one of the Eagles coaches told me that he will listen if the receivers coach has something. Hey, when I was in college, could be Aaron Moorhead specifically here because he came from college with Vanderbilt.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, we ran against this coverage. We ran this, and boy, we had success. And they may call up the tape and go, "Wow, look at the way you attacked that coverage." This could be fun. I wish, and I'm hoping, Geoff, that we get to go to training camp. I'm not real optimistic the media will be allowed to because of what we're dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this could be pretty damn cool, and I look forward to getting intel, as we will, you and I will, from our sources within the building, just to find out how it's going to work out and how everyone's doing.
No doubt about it. I also look forward to doing the next podcast where we go through the defensive coaching staff. There have been some major changes on that too. Look forward to going through that with you, Adam. That's going to do it for this episode of Inside the Birds, the leading podcast in Eagles intel, 10,000 strong. We appreciate all of our loyal listeners. A big thanks to our producer, Hunter Brody. I kid before, he does a great job. Check out his work on YouTube, Sports Talk with Broads. Check out his podcast that he does with former Villanova basketball star Darrell Reynolds. It's called Processed. And make sure you check him out on Twitter at Broads81. And again, go to our YouTube page and our website, InsideTheBirds.com, for more great ITB content. We've got some fresh new stuff right on the website right now. As always, we thank you for flying with us inside the bird.